Surprised how much is out there for free and how many community groups, VFWs, American Legions, will come to your campus and help you do workshops, provide you with literature and information for your literature racks to help out. One of the big challenges in Ohio in doing this veterans, as one person put it to me, it's a new word in the lexicon, doing something veteranish, is we only have one major military base in this state, right, Patterson. For a lot of colleges and institutions, my colleagues I talk to nationally, well, we've got Fort Hood, we've got Fort Bragg, we've got Parris Island, we've got Corpus Christi. Veterans in those communities and students can always go back inside the fence line. You're always welcome back on base to the Educational Services Center, to the chaplain, to Family Services. There are a lot of great resources in the state of Ohio. It's kind of creating that virtual base, and that's almost how we've sold our institution. When I started our initiative 8 years ago, come inside our fence line. You and your families. We'll get you directed. So that's what we're going to kind of put together. And then as we grow out that pyramid, Eli Faes is joining us here from the state of Ohio, Ohio Board of Regents and the Ohio GI Promise, to talk about on a broader level state resources. As you heard Director Gorell and stuff today, the state has a lot to offer. It's a great assistance. We're here because of the state engaging on this issue. So we're going to kind of work that way. Starting us off from Columbus State University is a very good friend, United States Navy veteran, flight deck officer, right? A lot of flight deck, LDO, so does that sound familiar? Send them down the deck, right? Instead of a pair of boots. If you don't know that in the Navy, when you leave an aircraft carrier and you're a pilot, they take your flight boots and put them on a catapult, eject them into the ocean as you transfer off the ship. So, Terry, you got your boots on? So Terry Wurst from Columbus State University, he's going to start at the bottom of the pyramid because Terry has been building a program at Columbus State. So Terry, what are those kind of key building blocks, the first things you want to look at?
Not to undermine a senior officer, but I know we're getting late in the day. Columbus State University is in Columbus, Georgia. Columbus State Community College.
Columbus State Community College, there we go.
So for all those two-year schools, we're being represented. Let me start off, I guess, by a few opening comments, and I do see a few faces in the crowd that I recognize. I still am very nervous because of being in this environment in higher education now, where I had a few years under my belt dealing with the program, but never with the individual. And I tried in past presentations of our office operation when I was with the State Approving Agency to always thank the school officials. And I thank all of you before I even get started with what little I don't know, thanking you for what you do for your veterans and their family members on your campus. So again, personally, from the bottom of my heart, I really want to thank you for what you do. And I'm really, really thrilled with having today as an opportunity to see things that have been in the works for many, many years, if not decades, come to fruition, seeing veterans start working hand in hand with higher education to really put some things in place that I think many have hoped for, many have worked for, many have seen long-term as some of the things that we really need to do to take care of the folks that are students on our statewide campuses. So, I'm going to just make a few comments. It's always harder to be concise than it is long, and I probably could talk for a long time about many different issues. The main areas that I'm to talk about, and Rick really hit it on the head. Let's talk about building blocks. So I'm now going to go ahead and revert back one day and pretend it's Sunday, because now it's going to be confession time. All right, as I mentioned, a lot of years working with the program. Well, this is what happened to me about a little over 3 years ago, when I found myself being hired in as an advisor on a state college campus, and my eyes were opened. First time, and I will admit this, even though I am a 10-year naval veteran, first time in my life I ever suffered panic attacks, dealing with crowds of not so happy veterans on the college campus trying to wonder what in the world's going on with their GI Bill benefits and their money, and why am I getting dropped out of class, and why am I getting booted out in the street? Okay, so here's the summary of that opening statement. Number one resource that you all have on your campus is your student veteran. And please make them aware that they are a resource, because number one, it'll open up a very important channel of communications for you. You'll get to establish some relationships, meaningful relationships with some of these individuals, and will provide you with a very important conduit of what's happening. In fact, I had a short conversation with a representative from the Department of Veteran Services, Patrick. I don't know if he's in this session. And he said, oh yeah, I was on your campus and I took some continuing education courses and it was wonderful, because as soon as I made the application 15 minutes later, I got this email that said, welcome as a veteran to Columbus State. And I said, that's great. That's in admissions. I didn't know for sure that was actually happening, but I'm real pleased to get that feedback, because I will pass it along. So my whole point again is start with the resources that are at hand. One of the things that was listed for me to touch on also was the one-stop model. And again, it gets back to that statement I made. This was a survival mechanism on my part. Okay, again, first time dealing with the numbers, I was seeing literally anywhere from 30 to 50 students a day as an advisor. And my right-hand man who's sitting way back in the corner, James Elliott, as the other school certifying official, trying to keep up with doing somewhere between 850 to 1,000 certifications, and really kind of learning it at the same time, because I had to get a quick introduction to that purple and green monster that some of us in the room deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I stuck out my hand. That's one thing I learned years and years ago when one of my training times was in naval recruiting, and introduced myself, and again, just kind of out of hand, didn't realize what kind of positive benefits that ended up creating, because when I introduced myself as a veteran to another veteran, even though I have a few years under my belt as far as life experiences go, it really helped me connect with those individuals, and it put us on a different plane, and it helped quickly settle down some of the angst that I was experiencing, that they were experiencing firsthand. So we started with that. One of the things that I quickly recognized in that operation at the time was that there seemed to be a lot of extra handling of documentation paperwork. Again, let me set the stage. For those of you that aren't familiar with post 9/11 3, 4, 5 years ago when it first rolled out, a lot of little kinks that needed to be worked out, even to the point where autumn of 2012 was about the worst point in VA processing history, where nationally the VA was backed up by 330,000 claims. That meant that Joe didn't get his book stipend in time to get books, and the term started. That means that Sally was living in her car because it took 2.5, 3 months before she got her housing money. Okay, not a real comfortable time for anybody involved with the process. So I looked to try to streamline. Myself and Director Dave Metz, who at that point we were still part of the financial aid operation, since we've developed and stood up the Veteran Services Department. We're all part of that now. But we had to put our heads together and put them together quickly to try to figure out what was going on. Let me also share just a couple of quick comments, if I might, feedback from my students. Student gets dropped for classes. We're open enrollment. We're a state institution. All that means is that your registration got dropped, right? Well, you and I know that. At least I've learned that. Most of the students that were first-time college students walked into my office and said, why did I get thrown out of college? They didn't realize that it was just something as simple as their classes being dropped, and that could be through channels, be recreated, and they could get re-registered and still continue on. So again, don't overlook some of the very, very simple things as getting feedback from your students, and try to figure out where in the heck they're coming from. And I heard a question, well, let me back up. I heard a statement in the opening remarks that said by one of the students about being out in the field and who's got my back. It's one of the first things you learn in the service. Who's got your back? And that's what one of the students asked me about a month into my job. And he walked up to me and said, Mr. Worst, who's got my back? And I said, you know what? This is a heck of a responsibility that I took on with this position. But boy, I'm going to dig in and learn it, and we're going to fix some problems that we've got right now. And again, thankfully, working with the financial aid department, we created an award, basically, an unofficial award, where we sat down and said, okay, veteran walks into the office, and if he gives me clear enough indication of where we can place him, we're going to give him credit for those finances up front so we can deal with the VA on the back end. So for those of you institutions that haven't figured out the real benefits of certifying zero tuition fees, please check that out, because that can make all the difference in the world. And especially, and I heard that in one of the sessions today, the VA's gotten better, and that's almost a detriment because now the money comes in too quick. So break their process. Okay, you have to look at your institution and your policies and programs, and then get somebody that has a little bit of insight of what goes on the VA side and try to go ahead and figure out what is the best model for you all to get that to work. Let me jump ahead. Another item I'm to touch on is campuses, branch campuses. Yes, we do have a branch campus that we call our Delaware campus. We also have about 9 other centers that surround the city of Columbus that we don't technically call branches. They're just centers, and we've tried to partner up with high schools and do those kind of things, which is wonderful. And it really, I think, excites me because it gets us more out into the different neighborhoods and communities where we can serve more people. Let me turn the clock back 10 and 15 years. Once upon a time, the organization that oversees all this GI Bill stuff in the state is on an annual contract. I still believe they are. I don't have the most recent history. But one of the things that drove that contract was the number of sites that were approved. So once upon a time, we really encouraged institutions of higher education to go out and approve all your branch locations. There are specific regulations on how that's to be done. And this is just to show you, I want to emphasize a statement I heard. Be careful what you ask for because you may end up getting it. And I really pressed Columbus State back in my other role, working for the state, to try to get Delaware campus approved, and thankfully they didn't quite get the paperwork done in time. Otherwise, I would have had a mess on my hands firsthand to deal with that. Okay, what does it mean to have a branch campus approved? Well, that means for the VA vernacular, you have a whole separate facility code. And if that fits your model of campuses and that's the way you want to administer things, then go for it. Deal with the state approving agency through the Ohio Department of Veteran Services and get that done. They'll help you do that. That's what they're there for. But if it doesn't fit your model, for example, a little school here in town called Ohio State, they have 5 major regional offices, and they do central certification for their GI Bill benefits. Now, that's good for an administrative consistency process, but one of the things that 488 says, you ought to have yourself at least one point of contact outside of having a certifying official. And the main purpose behind that is to not overtax your certifying official. The other side of that is that one person can't be the expert on all this stuff. Even to this day, I have people come into my office and say, well, gee, I'm getting federal tuition assistance. And I say, that's great. And boy, we are blessed at Columbus State to have Major Jay Favuzzi, who's our supervisor and our department head, because he's in the reserves and knows about that. And I don't have time to learn another program with 800 to 1,000 students and all their other issues. So look at that as a positive. When you see these things come down, you know, it's very important to give feedback, but look at it on how it can benefit you. It's really important, and please, as much as you can, share back and forth on how your models have worked and the positives so that we can all learn from that. I think it's very important. So again, back to this Delaware situation, so we do everything centrally. Ohio State does everything centrally. Some schools don't. They have it split up. If you do that model, here's what I would strongly encourage you to consider, and that is have a designated point of contact, even if you do central certification. And here's the reason. In my state days, traveling around the state working with proprietary schools, I'll try not to say anything too nasty, but I heard one proprietary school. I walked in and I asked the question. This was way before the days of us being concerned about our customer and success rates and all that. And I said, gee, you know, you're kind of a small operation here. What do you do when a veteran walks in? Oh, we've been told by the main office in Arizona to give the student this card with a toll-free number on it, and they go to a phone and they call, and that's how they get their help. Now let me ask everybody in this room, is that the way you want to be helped? That's the way I've approached everything at Columbus State. how do I want to be treated, or if my son was taking classes there since he's an Army veteran, or somebody else's son or daughter, how do I want them to be treated? That's my general life rule of thumb right now, and that's to hopefully, in addition, provide some insight since I'm a little farther down the road. So before I get any older, I think I'll pass this.
At Lorain County Community College, we work really more on more of a team effort, and it's not just a point of contact. Even though that we do have our advisor of record, which would be me, we also have our faculty advisor, who's a veteran, who's also the two-time Pulitzer Prize finalist, in poetry, and is also working with us to develop perhaps a program or a class for veterans to express their experiences. Maybe English or literature, I'm not sure where we're going with that, but keeping ourselves open to encouraging our veterans to open up. I work as part of an advising team. I also work on prior learning assessment. I work closely with our veterans certifiers, even though I'm an academic advisor by trade. I am not a veteran. I am a mother of a National Guardsman. However, I am incredibly sensitive to our veterans' needs, their concerns, their family issues, the lack of financial support at times, the lack of books, pencils, paper. We try to really be aware of what the needs of our veterans are. But it's a team effort at Lorain County Community College. I don't know enough. I'm not a veteran, so I have to lean heavily on my team, our faculty who are veterans, and anyone that can help our veterans take the next step to success. Our services that we offer our students, our veteran students, would be the disability services. I was just in a presentation where I made a note to make it clear in our veterans orientation program that we differentiate between disability services at our institution and voc rehab and disability services outside of our institution. So I'm learning as we go here. We also have tutoring, our career services area. We get our veterans going, we get them moving forward, try to remove any obstacles. I work hand in hand with our faculty. I can't tell you how many times that when I've had a veteran who's had some difficulties, no matter what, could be financial, could be emotional, could be family, and we need an intervention to keep them going, that I don't go to a faculty member and say, I'm working with a veteran, this is your student, can we help this person get through this bump? And I like to have one faculty member say, no, I can't help you. They're always willing to accommodate if you explain what's going on with that veteran, the issues are, without violating confidentiality. We have our counseling team that works with our veterans in case more of a referral basis. We have our financial aid group. They're amazing. They do everything they possibly can, along with our veterans representatives, to do the actual certifying to make sure that our veterans don't run into trouble, and they do. We all know that they run into issues with books, or if there's a problem with the account. And the goal that we try to make is that it doesn't stop them from going forward. So again, as a team effort, we try to make sure that we're all talking. I network with probably 6 or 7 departments on a regular basis for one veteran, because you don't know what the needs are, and you try to anticipate. Make sure that they have the reference materials, that they know what the next step is. That's the worst case I found when I have someone coming back, having come back from Iraq or Afghanistan, and they're sitting in front of me and they vibrate. They're bouncing because their energy level is such. Just tell me what to do. Give me some structure. How do I go forward? To make sure that you do that for the veteran is very, very important. Most of you know this. Again, working with the prior learning assessment, making sure they're getting the credits. I work with our transfer center very closely. She'll look at the transcripts that come in, ACE, the DD-214, the JSD, or the Air Force. She'll look at it, she'll send it to me if she's questioning Do we need to give more? What's this person's major? How can we help them? We try not to give credits that are not needed because of the staff issues. So again, working in collaboration with the Transfer Center, the financial aid area to make sure we keep our veterans out of any kind of staff issues. And then career services. The career services piece is very, very important, at least to us. We want to make sure that they are working not only with our advisors and counselors, but they're working in tandem with career services to get their resumes going, to make sure that we're sensitive to the wonderful experience that they earned in the military, and how do we account for that? How do we position these veterans on resume so that employers see the value to this veteran who's not only getting either a certificate or degree or moving forward maybe to our university partnership, which has four-year programs on our campus. And then, as an aside, I work very closely with our workforce development group. You know, some of our veterans are not just coming back, they've been around for a while, and maybe they've lost a job and they're coming back and they don't have any funding. So we try to work with them through the workforce development WIA funds to, and our GIAC, our veterans group at the workforce development to utilize any and all programs that might be available. I liaison once a week with the workforce group. I'm physically there, and at that facility, we also have our veterans, Lorain County Veterans Services group. We're working with them to make sure that we're on target for our veterans. And lastly, we do have a new Veterans Lounge. We're very proud. We would like it to be 5 times what it is, but we're taking what we can get, and it's quite lovely. We're dedicating that on November 11th. I think it's appropriate. And we have our offices to the outside of the Veterans Lounge, but what we're doing is trying to develop programs and services and a way of making sure that veterans know what is going on on campus, but most important, what's going on in our county and the surrounding area, opportunities, career fairs. So we're trying to lock into programs that will have representation in that lounge at all times, but a number of different things. For example, if it's counseling, or if it's our faculty advisor in there once a week to develop trust and a sense of I can't think of the word. I don't come up to me. Something that happens every day, something that they can count on and they can rely on. So that's what we're trying to do there.
Quotidian is the Latin word for daily. Quotidian.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So these are just a few things that we try to do at Lorain County Community College. We're always learning. I probably have 3 pages of notes to maybe improve what we're doing, and I can continue to learn from the various institutions and all the conferences that we go to. We hope just to keep improving. So thank you.
Thank you, Carrie, liaison at the University of Toledo. And now what we're going to do at this point, as we grow out our pyramid, Carrie has addressed what you can do on campus. Haraz is going to talk about the wealth of resources in the broader community, as Carrie related to partnering with the community. There's some great resources out there, and he's going to tell you his experiences of what you might be able to get done for free. Haraz?
It's a big room. I couldn't see everyone in the back, so I'll just stand if you don't mind. So I haven't heard this shared yet today, but for those of you that don't know, Ohio is home to almost 900,000 veterans. So that's the 6th largest population of veterans in the United States. So what's that mean for us working in higher education? Chances are there are other veterans living within your communities that want to help other veterans. As the Colonel said earlier, he said veterans aren't looking for a hand up but a handshake, or a handout. Not looking for a handout but a handshake. I often say they're not looking for a handout but maybe a hand up. So that goes back to partnerships and how can we help our veterans, active service members, members of the Guard and Reserve, and their families have a successful transition from military service to the classroom and beyond. That goes back to partnerships, which is what I will be chatting about for a few minutes. I'll start out by talking about our lounge that we recently dedicated to the University of Toledo. Director Grill also alluded to competition. It's always good to see what your neighbors are doing and see how you can incorporate that into your campus. So I went and visited our friends at Terra Community College. I said, wow, they've got an impressive little lounge here. You know, we have nothing like this at the University of Toledo for our veterans. I think you referred to that as kind of your campus's USO lounge. And I really like that concept. So USO lounges are at airports across the country, and it's a place for your veterans to go and rejuvenate, to connect with other veterans, to kind of get updated on what's going on in the community. So we at the University of Toledo, we don't have a budget line per se for our veterans programs. I would presume that many of you also don't have big fancy budget lines. So that goes back to partnerships in the community. I'm a Navy Reserve Lieutenant, and one of my fellow Navy sailors is a commander that works at Whirlpool. I called him up one day. I said, hey, sir, I got a quick question for you. He's like, okay, Lieutenant, what's going on? I said, well, hey, do you guys have any kind of veterans programs at Whirlpool where you sponsor veteran organizations? And he says, well, why do you ask? And I said, well, I went and visited Terra, and they have this really cool kind of lounge on their campus, and I'd like to bring something like that to the University of Toledo. We just don't have the funds for it. And he said, well, actually, I kind of head up our veterans organization at Whirlpool. So I'm going to send you a guide of some of our products and go in there and make some requests, and we'll see what we can do. No promises made. So I made a very, very conservative request on things we wanted, like a refrigerator for their lunches, a coffee maker. Someone alluded to earlier, all veterans drink coffee, so it's good to have a coffee maker. I thought, maybe if someone wants some bagels or something, to have a toaster, and they want to grab a thing of popcorn and have a microwave. So I made a very conservative request. The folks from Whirlpool were on campus for something else, and I took the time to say, hey, why don't you guys stop over to this room that we have that I'd like to make into our lounge. And here's kind of the vision I have for our lounge and some of the feedback I got from our veterans. 30 minutes later, I got a call from the commander. He said, hey, my boss is so impressed. They're going to authorize everything that you've asked for, but we're going to upgrade it to our top-of-the-line products at Whirlpool. So here came the stainless steel refrigerator and bamboo coffee tables for studying, and all these one-cup coffee makers. But to tie it back into that partnership, I wanted to make sure that Whirlpool got some recognition for what they did. They really went out of their way to sponsor veterans on our campus. So we had a ribbon cutting, and as a public affairs officer in the Navy, I would encourage all of you, if you're doing something good on your campus, not to give yourself a pat on the back necessarily, but reach out to the media, because that's going to let other people in your communities know, hey, we have 1,000 veterans on our campus, or 2,000 veterans like Ohio State, or 500 some veterans like the University of Toledo. Wow, we could be investing in veterans right here in our own backyard. So we had this press conference, and what did we do? We invited the folks from Whirlpool Clyde to come out and talk about their commitment to veterans. One of the things that Whirlpool Clyde does is they have a hiring initiative to hire veterans. So now we have a partnership with Clyde for certain jobs that they're looking for. They're going to reach out to the University of Toledo and say, hey, do you have any veterans that might fit this criteria for what we're looking for? Got a lot of great feedback from the lounge. Something else quick story I want to share with you. I'd say I've been in the military for 13 years. I was prior enlisted Army. I'm now a commissioned military officer in the Navy. I've had 2 deployments under my belt, one to Bosnia, one to Afghanistan. When I went to Bosnia, I was a student at Kent State University, and I came back and I was trying to navigate, what campus was like. Being 21 years old, coming back from some of the stuff I saw over in Bosnia, I wasn't sure how I was going to fit in. Then I came back from Afghanistan, where there's guns and bullets and bombs and other service members that are maimed and dying, and I had a different experience than what I had when I came back from Bosnia. So one thing I just want to encourage you all about is that you can have a platoon of infantrymen all go through Fort Benning together, all go through their MOS school together, all deploy to Afghanistan together, and all go on every single convoy mission side by side, and then all come back together. But you cannot cookie cutter the approach to helping the veterans, because they had things in their life that affected them before they mobilized, and they have things in their life that are affecting them when they come back. So we had a 44-year-old Army infantryman that had been in Afghanistan. I think it was Afghanistan or it was Iraq. It was one of the 2 combat operations. He came back to the university, so he's a non-traditional student for starters. He enrolls in classes, and Beth and I were on a road trip going somewhere, and I got a call that this student was dropping out of all of his classes and he was going to be applying for food stamps and welfare because he didn't have the money to make ends meet. So, hey, why am I going to go to school if I need to put food on my table? And in the meantime, I need some money to get groceries. So he wanted to apply for, food stamps and welfare. And I called him up. I said, hey, what's going on? And he said, well, listen, my VA benefits are backed up. My claim's kind of hosed up. Someone gave me some bad advice, and I'm in a bad spot. I'm just going to drop out of college. College isn't going to be for me. This was his first semester. This was in the first 2 weeks of enrolling, transitioning from active duty to college. Through a partnership, I was able to reach out to one of the local American Legion groups, and I said, hey, I got a student that's in a jam. Is there anything you can do to help? They cut him a $500 check on the spot and said, listen, take this down and get yourself some groceries and some food and stay in school. Don't quit just yet. Your VA benefits are going to come along. Well, being in the military, I picked up the phone and I called some command sergeant major at Fort Drum, and we had a conversation. I said, hey, listen, I got one of your soldiers on my campus that just got off active duty, and here's the experience that he's had. And he's telling me that he was given some bad gouge by the folks back at Drum, plus he's got his VA benefits that are a little bit hosed up. That student is now pushing a 3.5, 3.6 GPA. He's doing really well in school. But it also goes back to that circle of life. So I was able to help this student of ours stay in school through our partnerships in the community. And now he's investing in other veterans that are going through similar situations. Part of that partnership, the last two quick partnerships I want to touch on, we're fortunate to have a vet center in our backyard. A vet center is it falls under the umbrella of the Department of Veterans Affairs, and they provide free transitional counseling to veterans of armed conflict. I think Kent has one, I'm sure Ohio State has one, I think the Cleveland area has one. There's several throughout the state of Ohio. We're fortunate to have one about 5 or 10 minutes from our campus. We have a great partnership with them. So they come over and they meet with veterans on our campus if the veterans want to meet with another veteran. And they want to be able to talk to things that maybe someone that hasn't served in the military can't really relate to. Additionally, part of that partnership continues once a week. We also have a VA community-based outpatient clinic on our health science campus. I'm over there once a week. It used to be every Friday, just transition every Wednesday. So I'm over there to kind of help veterans make that transition from military service back to the classroom. The greatest thing is seeing a patient at the VA and then walking across campus and seeing that same patient with a backpack on. And I stop and say, hey, how are you doing? Oh, sir, I'm doing great. This is great. And then you hear the older veterans say, man, when I came out of Vietnam or Korea or World War II, and I was going to the VA, there was no rep there. So if you don't have a CBOC in your backyard, find another place in your community where veterans gather and just go there and have some information and be able to answer some questions for them and encourage them to get back in college. The first step is always the hardest step. But if they can take one step and then they take another step, pretty soon they're going to be walking across the stage at commencement. And as the Colonel said earlier, we want to keep Ohio veterans back here in the state of Ohio, so we need to help them have that successful transition. The last thing, just briefly, a quick plug for the National Guard. I get a lot of students that come into my office every day that aren't in the military and they think we're a recruiting office. Hey, I want to join the military. Okay, great. Why do you want to join the military? Well, I want to pay for college and I also want to serve my country. So as a Navy lieutenant, frankly, I always encourage them to go check out the Air National Guard or the Ohio Army National Guard. We're one of a few states in the country that offers 100% college tuition if you join the National Guard. For these people, they're serving at a minimum of 39 days a year is their commitment. A week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer. They have an 8-year obligation. 6 years of that is a drilling obligation. We have a lot of students on our campus that are members of the Ohio Army or Air National Guard. So we've partnered with the National Guard. I've given their quote-unquote Guard Scholarship Coordinator, aka recruiter, an office within our office. So if people have issues with their scholarship, instead of having to call down to Columbus and wait 2 or 3 or 4 days for an answer, they now have a resource immediately on campus. The other thing that does is it brings other folks onto our campus and they can see the benefits that we offer our veterans and our service members and their families that are receiving VA benefits. So chances are they may look at UT and say, hey, this is for me. But as someone said earlier, I think I wrote it down here. Let me see, I want to do the right thing for the veteran, even if it isn't the right thing for your university. So sometimes we get people that come to UT and they say, hey, UT's not for me. Well, hey, you got Bowling Green down the road, you got Tara, you got Owens, you got Lords. There's other ways to get your college degree accomplished. And we're here for you as a resource, regardless if you go to the University of Toledo or not. I think that's all I have, sir.
For the Ohio Board of Regents. And Eli and Terry and I go back to 2007, 2008, when this thing called the Ohio GI Promise was being discussed, and how do we make this happen? And Eli was a key part of that team and represents what's happened over the last 4 or 5 years. I told this in another group, people didn't realize. 7, 8 years ago, Ohio ranked 47th or 48th in the nation in terms of how poorly it was serving veterans. And in 5 to 6 years, 7 years, that has changed a full 180. And Eli was a part of that team from way back when. So I'm going to let Eli talk about what the state is doing, some things coming down the road, and some broader initiatives. Eli.
Well, thank you, Rick. Yeah, I guess we do kind of go back that far, don't we? It seems kind of strange at this point. I'll just give you kind of a background or a recent history of the state initiatives. And as I'm a civilian too, by the way. I always like to point that out when I'm addressing. That's scary. So the Ohio GI Promise originated as an executive order in 2008. The main component of it was the offering of in-state tuition to any veteran, basically getting rid of the 12 months residency requirement. So that was the main component. It was then codified into law the following year. A couple of the other components of the GI Promise, though, were that each institution, each USO public institution in the state of Ohio had a point of contact for student veterans on their campuses, and that Right. Oh, and one of the other components was that they followed the ACE guidelines when it came to awarding credit. So fast forward to 2013, Governor Case's executive order, which created the recommendations that the Chancellor came up with in the Value of Ohio Veterans Report. And one of the things that we did when we put together those recommendations were we surveyed all 37 institutions to kind of see where they were at on some of these things, such as awarding credit for military training experience and coursework. And what we found were that there was a lot of inconsistency across the board as to how the institutions were tackling this. Some even said in the survey that they weren't even using the ACE guidelines. So that right there, that was, there was just one or two, but still, that was kind of a glaring thing. And we knew that we would have to offer guidance. And that's kind of how the recommendations and the subsequent legislation in House Bill 48 came together. So we can offer that guidance and we can have some uniformity system-wide. I heard they were doing it. Yeah, they need to drown me out apparently. So that's kind of why we're all here today. Obviously, we took it upon ourselves at the Regents to offer the guidance. Dr. Paul Compton and the MSI team is the reason why we're all here today, to kind of move forward, to make sure that our student veterans are getting served on our campuses. Haraz mentioned, he used the term investing a couple of times, because obviously one of the things when you hear resources from the state, well, we need more money. And one of the fears was that coming out with House Bill 48, some of the recommendations that they would be considered unfunded mandates, perhaps, by some of the campuses. That actually didn't occur, but, looking at it as an investment, if you are investing in student services for your veterans on your campuses, if you're attracting veterans to your campuses, and make sure that they have the support system in place to be successful, they are going to be successful students. Everybody talks about how motivated student veterans are, and they're going to complete. Well, guess what? Funding is now completion-based. We are on a performance-based funding system now in the state of Ohio. So it behooves you to have good student veteran services on your campuses, because they're going to be completers. So that's kind of...
Following on that, some of you may have heard me mention this in another session. Right now in Ohio, only 40% of the young men and women eligible for the new GI Bill are using it. There's a message to your recruitment offices. That means there's 60% out there with federal dollars in hand they're eligible for. And they do mission complete. I know easily at my institution. My veterans graduate at